Marcus Williams was 10 years old when he decided that he was stupid. He did not decide this on his own. The world had been telling him this truth day after day, year after year, until he finally believed it. Every morning, he walked into Jefferson Elementary School with his head down and his shoulders bent forward like he was trying to make himself smaller. He sat in the back row of Mrs. Patterson's 4th grade classroom, in the corner seat near the window. Nobody fought him for that seat. Nobody wanted to sit next to the boy who could not read. The other children had learned to ignore him. They did not hate Marcus. They simply forgot he existed. He was like a piece of furniture that had always been there, something you walked past without noticing. When the teacher called on students to answer questions, her eyes moved across the room and somehow always skipped over Marcus. It was easier that way for everyone. Marcus had a condition called dyslexia, but nobody had told him that word yet. All he knew was that when he looked at letters on a page, they moved, they danced and twisted and changed places with each other. The word was became saw. The word dog became God. Numbers were even worse. They jumped around like insects, never staying still long enough for him to catch them. His report cards were a sea of red ink. Does not participate. Struggles with basic concepts. Needs significant improvement. His teachers wrote these words with tired hands. They had 30 other students to worry about. They could not stop the whole class to wait for one boy who could not keep up. Marcus's mother was named Linda Williams. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. In the morning, she cleaned offices in a tall building downtown. In the evening, she worked at a grocery store, scanning items and bagging groceries until her feet ached and her back screamed for rest. Linda was a good mother. She loved her son more than anything in the world. But love could not fix the problem she did not understand. When she looked at Marcus's report cards, she felt something cold and heavy settle in her chest. She blamed herself. She thought maybe she had done something wrong when he was a baby. Maybe she had not read to him enough. Maybe she had worked too much and held him too little. At night, after Marcus went to sleep, Linda sat at the kitchen table and cried. She cried quietly, pressing her hand over her mouth so her son would not hear. She did not know how to help him. She did not have money for special tutors or private schools. She barely had money for groceries. At school, Marcus learned to be invisible. He learned that if he stayed quiet and still, the world would leave him alone. He did not raise his hand. He did not ask questions. When the class read out loud, taking turns going around the room, Marcus's heart would pound so hard he thought it might break through his chest. When his turn came, he would stare at the words on the page and feel them scatter like frightened birds. The other children would giggle. Mrs. Patterson would sigh and say, "That's okay, Marcus. Let's move on." Those 3 words hurt more than laughter. Let's move on. It meant he was not worth waiting for. It meant he was holding everyone back. It meant he should just give up. But there was one place where Marcus did not feel stupid. There was one place where his brain worked differently, in a way that felt like magic instead of a curse. 2 blocks from his apartment building stood an old church called Grace Community Baptist. The church had been there for 60 years, its red bricks faded and its white paint peeling. Most Sundays, only a handful of old people came to pray. The rest of the week, the building sat empty and quiet. Marcus discovered the church basement by accident. He was walking home from school one rainy afternoon, taking the long way to avoid a group of boys who sometimes called him names. He ducked into the church to escape the rain, and he found a set of stairs leading down into darkness. The basement was dusty and forgotten. Old folding chairs were stacked against the walls. Boxes of Christmas decorations sat in corners, waiting for a holiday that was months away. And in the center of the room, covered with a gray cloth like a sleeping ghost, was a piano. Marcus had seen pianos before, of course. There was one in the school music room, shiny and black, that only the music teacher was allowed to touch. But this piano was different. This piano was old and beaten and abandoned. Nobody would care if he touched it. He pulled back the cloth and looked at the keys. Some of them were yellow with age. One of them was cracked down the middle. But when Marcus pressed a single key, a sound came out that made something inside him wake up. He did not know how to play. He had never had a lesson in his life. But he sat down on the dusty bench and began to touch the keys, one by one, listening to the sounds they made. And something strange happened, something that had never happened to him before. The sounds made sense. When Marcus looked at letters, they jumped and twisted and refused to be understood. But when he listened to notes, they stayed exactly where they were supposed to be. They lined up in his mind like soldiers, clear and perfect and still. He could hear how they connected to each other, how they wanted to move, where they wanted to go. He started going to the church basement every day after school. He told his mother he was staying late for a homework club that did not exist. She was too tired to check. Every afternoon, Marcus sat at the old piano and taught himself how to make sounds become songs. He did not read music. The black dots on the page danced just like letters did. But he did not need to read. He could hear a song once, just once, and it would live inside his head forever. Every note, every pause, every rise and fall. His brain, which could not hold on to the spelling of simple words, could hold entire symphonies. Nobody knew about the piano. Nobody knew about the music building inside this silent boy. His teachers still saw a struggling student. His classmates still saw nobody at all. His mother still saw a child she could not help but in that dusty basement. Alone with the cracked keys and the forgotten instrument, Marcus Williams was not stupid. He was not invisible. He was not a problem to be solved or a burden to be carried. In that basement, Marcus was something else entirely. He just did not know what it was called yet. The world had decided who Marcus was. They had written his story for him in red ink on report cards, in sighs of frustrated teachers, in the silence of classmates who looked right through him. But the world was wrong. The world had missed something important, and soon, very soon, the truth would come out. It would come out through an old piano in a church basement, played by a boy that everyone had given up on. It would come out in notes and chords and melodies that would make people stop and stare and wonder how they had missed what was right in front of them all along. But that moment had not come yet. For now, Marcus was still the silent boy in the back row, invisible and forgotten, carrying a secret so big that it would change everything. He just had to wait for the world to listen. Harold Jenkins had been the janitor at Grace Community Baptist Church for 23 years. He knew every corner of that old building. He knew which floorboards creaked and which windows stuck. He knew the smell of the place in summer when the heat made the wood expand, and in winter when the cold crept through the cracks in the walls. Harold was 61 years old. His hair had turned gray long ago, and his knees hurt when he climbed stairs. He had a wife named Betty who made the best fried chicken in the neighborhood, and 2 grown children who called him every Sunday after church. He was a simple man who lived a simple life, and he liked it that way. On a Thursday evening in late October, Harold was working late. The church was hosting a funeral the next morning, and the pastor wanted everything to look perfect. Harold mopped the floors and polished the wooden pews until they shone. He cleaned the windows and dusted the altar. By the time he finished, the sun had gone down and the church was filled with shadows. Harold was about to lock up and go home when he heard something that made him stop. It was music. Piano music, coming from somewhere below him. At first he thought he was imagining things. Nobody used the church basement anymore. It was just a storage room filled with old junk and memories. But the music continued, drifting up through the floor like smoke. And Harold knew he was not dreaming. He walked to the basement door and opened it slowly. The stairs creaked under his feet as he went down, one step at a time. The music got louder with each step. It was not simple music, not the kind of easy songs that children played. It was complicated and beautiful and sad, the kind of music that made your heart feel things you could not name. At the bottom of the stairs, Harold stopped and stared. There, sitting at the old piano that had been gathering dust for years, was a small boy. He could not have been more than 10 or 11 years old. His clothes were worn and his shoes had holes in them. His back was to Harold, and his fingers moved across the keys like they had been doing this forever. Harold did not recognize the song, but he knew it was something special. The notes poured out of that broken piano like water from a spring, clean and pure and endless. The boy played with his eyes closed, his head tilted slightly to one side, lost in a world that only he could see. For a long moment, Harold just stood there and listened. He forgot about his aching knees and his tired back. He forgot about the funeral tomorrow and the floors he still needed to check. He forgot about everything except the music and the small boy making it. The song ended, and the last note hung in the air like a question. The boy opened his eyes and turned around, and that was when he saw Harold standing in the shadows. The boy jumped up from the bench, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to be here. Please don't tell anyone, please." Harold raised his hand slowly, the way you might approach a frightened animal. "Easy now," he said. "Easy, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to tell anyone anything." The boy was shaking. His hands were trembling at his sides, and his breath was coming fast and shallow. Harold could see that he was ready to run, ready to disappear into the night and never come back. "What's your name, son?" Harold asked gently. "Marcus," the boy whispered. "Marcus Williams." "Well, Marcus Williams, that was some beautiful playing. Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus looked down at the floor. "I taught myself," he said. "I come here after school sometimes. The door is never locked. I know I shouldn't, but what? But the piano is the only thing that makes sense to me." Marcus's voice was so quiet that Harold had to lean forward to hear him. "Everything else is hard. School is hard. Reading is hard. But the piano is easy. The piano is the only thing that's easy." Harold felt something twist in his chest. He had seen this boy before. He realized he had seen him walking through the neighborhood with his head down, always alone, always quiet. He had seen him sitting on the church steps sometimes, just staring at nothing. He had never thought much about it. Just another kid from the neighborhood, struggling like everyone else. But this was not just another kid. This was something different. This was something Harold had never seen before. "That song you were playing," Harold said. "What was it called?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know the name. I heard it on the radio a long time ago. Maybe 3 years ago. It just stayed in my head." Harold felt his breath catch in his throat. "You heard it once, 3 years ago, and you remembered the whole thing." "I remember all of them," Marcus said. "Every song I ever heard. They live inside my head like pictures. I can see them, every note, every sound. I just close my eyes and they're there. Harold did not know much about music. He could not carry a tune in a bucket, as his wife liked to say, but he knew enough to understand that what this boy was describing was not normal. It was not something that ordinary people could do. It was something rare, something precious, something almost impossible. How long have you been coming here? Harold asked. Almost a year, Marcus said. I started last winter. I was cold and I came inside to get warm, and I found the piano. I didn't mean to play it. I just wanted to touch it. But then I touched it, and it was like the piano was talking to me. It was like it had been waiting for me. Harold lowered himself onto an old folding chair. His knees protested, but he ignored them. He needed to sit down. He needed to think about what he was seeing. This boy, this small and scared and forgotten boy, was playing music that Harold had never heard before. Music that sounded like it belonged in concert halls, not church basements. Music that came from somewhere deep and true and beautiful. And nobody knew. Nobody in the whole world knew about this except Harold, sitting in a dusty basement on a Thursday night. Does your mother know you come here? Harold asked. Marcus shook his head quickly. She works a lot. She's tired. I don't want to bother her. And anyway, she wouldn't understand. Nobody understands. What do you mean? Marcus looked up, and Harold saw something in his eyes that made his heart hurt. It was pain, old and deep and heavy, the kind of pain that no child should carry. At school they think I'm stupid, Marcus said. The other kids, the teachers, everyone. They think I can't learn anything. They think I'm slow. But I'm not slow. I'm just different. My brain works different. When I look at words, they move around and I can't make them stay still. But when I hear music, it's perfect. It's crystal clear. It's the only thing that's ever been clear. Harold sat in silence for a long time. He did not know what to say. He did not know how to help this boy or what to do with the secret he had just discovered. Part of him wanted to tell someone. Part of him wanted to run to the pastor, to the school, to anyone who would listen. This boy was special. This boy had a gift. Someone needed to know. But another part of him understood that the world was not always kind to special things. The world liked to fit people into boxes. And when someone did not fit, the world often tried to crush them until they did. This boy had found something beautiful in this basement. Something that was his alone. Maybe it was not Harold's place to take that away. I won't tell anyone, Harold said finally. Your secret is safe with me. Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding forever. Thank you, he said. Thank you so much. But Marcus, you need to know something. What you can do. It's not normal. It's special. And special things deserve to be seen. Marcus shook his head. Not yet, he said. I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I need to get better. Harold wanted to argue. He wanted to tell this boy that he was already better than anyone Harold had ever seen. But he held his tongue. Some things could not be rushed. Some flowers needed to bloom in their own time. Okay, Harold said. Take your time. But promise me something. What? Promise me that one day, you'll let the world hear what I heard tonight. Promise me you won't keep this gift locked away forever. Marcus looked at the old piano, at the cracked keys and the dusty wood and the shadows that surrounded them. Then he looked back at Harold, and for the first time, there was a small light in his eyes. I promise, he said. Harold nodded and stood up slowly. His knees cracked and he winced. He was getting too old for surprises like this. I'll be going now, he said, but I'll leave the basement door unlocked. You come here whenever you want. This is your place now. He walked up the stairs and left Marcus alone with the piano, but all the way home and all through the night, he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. A boy that the world had thrown away, making music that angels would envy. Harold did not tell anyone that night. He kept his promise. But he knew, deep in his bones, that this secret would not stay hidden forever. Gifts like that had a way of finding the light. It was only a matter of time. Dolores Franklin had been teaching music for 32 years. She had started when she was young and full of dreams. When she believed that music could change the world and that every child had a song inside them waiting to be discovered. She had been so hopeful back then, so sure that her life would be filled with magic and meaning. Now she was 60 years old, and the magic had faded. It was not that she hated her job. She did not. She still loved music with all her heart, but 32 years of budget cuts and crowded classrooms and children who did not care had worn her down. 32 years of watching art and music programs disappear from schools, of being told that her subject did not matter as much as math or reading, had left her tired and bitter. She had started thinking about retirement. She had a small pension saved up, and her husband George was already retired, spending his days fishing and watching television. They could move somewhere warm, maybe Florida or Arizona, somewhere with sunshine and no snow. She could finally rest. But then Harold Jenkins came to see her, and everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November. Mrs. Franklin was packing up her things after a long day of teaching children who barely listened. Her classroom was small and cramped, filled with instruments that were old and broken and held together with tape and prayers. She was tired, and her back hurt, and she wanted nothing more than to go home and soak in a hot bath. That was when Harold knocked on her door. She knew Harold from church. He had been coming to Grace Community Baptist for as long as she had, which was almost her whole life. He was a good man, quiet and kind, the type who helped without being asked and never expected anything in return. "Mrs. Franklin," Harold said, "I need to talk to you about something important." She invited him in and offered him a seat. He sat down heavily, like a man carrying a weight he could not put down. "What is it, Harold? Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," he said, "but I need you to come with me. I need you to see something. Or rather, I need you to hear something." "Hear what?" Harold leaned forward, and his eyes were bright with something she had not seen in him before. It looked like wonder. It looked like hope. "There's a boy," he said, "a young boy, maybe 10 or 11. He comes to the church basement after school. He plays the piano there, the old one that's been sitting down there for years. Mrs. Franklin, I've heard a lot of music in my life, but I've never heard anything like what this boy can do." Mrs. Franklin felt a flicker of interest, but it was buried under years of disappointment. She had heard this story before. Parents who thought their children were special. Teachers who saw potential where there was none. Everyone wanted to believe they had found a prodigy. Almost no one ever had. "Harold, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I've been teaching a long time. I've seen a lot of children who were supposed to be talented. Most of them just needed more practice." "This is different," Harold said. "I know what you're thinking, and I thought the same thing. But Mrs. Franklin, this boy taught himself to play. He's never had a lesson. He can't even read music, but he can hear a song once, just once, and play it back perfectly. I heard him play something I'd never heard before. Something complicated and beautiful. And he told me he learned it from the radio 3 years ago." Mrs. Franklin felt something stir inside her. It was small, like a candle flame trying to stay alive in a strong wind. But it was there 3 years ago. 3 years, and he remembered every note. She was quiet for a long moment. What Harold was describing was called perfect pitch and auditory memory. It was rare, extremely rare. Most musicians spent their whole lives trying to develop even a fraction of those abilities. To find them naturally in a child, an untrained child, would be like finding a diamond in a pile of rocks. "What's the boy's name?" she asked. "Marcus Williams. He goes to Jefferson Elementary. His teachers think he's..." Harold paused, searching for the right word. "They think he's slow. He has trouble reading, trouble with numbers. But Mrs. Franklin, I'm telling you, there's nothing slow about this boy. His brain just works different." Mrs. Franklin stood up and reached for her coat. The tiredness was still there, but something else was there too. Something that felt almost like the old days, when she still believed in miracles. "Take me to him," she said. They walked to the church in silence. The November wind was cold, and the sky was gray with a promise of winter. Mrs. Franklin pulled her coat tight around her and tried not to hope too much. Hope had hurt her too many times before. The church was empty and quiet. Harold led her down the basement stairs, moving slowly because of his knees. The stairs creaked under their feet, and the basement smelled like dust and old memories. And then she heard it. The music came floating up to meet them, soft at first, then growing stronger. It was Chopin, she realized. Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano, a piece that professional pianists practiced for years before attempting, a piece that had made grown men weep with its beauty and its pain, and it was being played perfectly. Mrs. Franklin's hands began to shake. She grabbed the railing to steady herself and listened. The music poured over her like water, washing away 32 years of disappointment and doubt. She had heard this piece performed by masters, by graduates of the finest conservatories in the world, and what she was hearing now was just as good, maybe better. Because there was something in this performance that the masters often lacked. There was raw emotion, pure and unfiltered. The sound of a soul crying out for something it could not name. She reached the bottom of the stairs and saw him, a small boy with worn clothes and tired eyes, sitting at a broken piano in a dusty basement, playing music that did not belong in this world. The piece ended. The last note faded into silence, and Marcus turned around and saw them standing there. His face went pale with fear. He jumped up from the bench, ready to run, ready to disappear. "It's okay," Harold said quickly. "It's okay, Marcus. This is Mrs. Franklin. She's a music teacher. She's a friend. She just wants to talk to you." Marcus looked at Mrs. Franklin with eyes full of suspicion and fear. He had learned not to trust adults. Adults had failed him too many times. But Mrs. Franklin was not looking at him like the other adults did. She was not looking at him with pity or frustration or disappointment. She was looking at him like he was something precious, something valuable, something that mattered. "Where did you learn to play that?" she asked. Her voice was shaking. "I heard it on the radio," Marcus said quietly. "A long time ago. I just remembered it. You just remembered it." Mrs. Franklin pressed her hand to her chest. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. "Marcus, do you know what piece that was?" He shook his head. "That was Chopin's Ballade No. 1. It's one of the hardest pieces of piano music ever written. Professional pianists study for years before they can play it, and you learned it by hearing it once on the radio." Marcus nodded slowly, like he was not sure if this was a good thing or a bad thing. Mrs. Franklin lowered herself onto the old bench beside him. Her legs were weak, and she needed to sit down. She needed to think. She needed to understand what she was seeing. "Play something else for me," she said. "Play anything. Whatever you want." Marcus hesitated. Then he turned back to the piano and placed his fingers on the keys. He closed his eyes, tilting his head to the side like he was listening to something only he could hear, and then he began to play. This time it was something Mrs. Franklin did not recognize. It was beautiful and strange, full of sadness and hope mixed together like paint on a canvas. It sounded like loneliness. It sounded like a boy who had spent his whole life being invisible, finally finding a way to be seen. "What is that?" she whispered when he finished. "What piece is that?" Marcus looked at her, and for the first time there was something like pride in his eyes. "I made it up," he said. "It's mine." Mrs. Franklin felt tears running down her cheeks. She did not try to wipe them away. She let them fall, let them mark this moment for what it was. In 32 years of teaching, she had never found what she was looking for. She had never found the child who would make it all worthwhile, the proof that music really could change the world. She had almost given up. She had almost walked away. But here he was, right in front of her, hidden in a basement, playing a broken piano, with no idea how special he was. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was full of something that had been missing for a very long time. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. You have a gift, a rare and beautiful gift, and I'm going to help you share it with the world." Marcus looked at her with wide eyes. Nobody had ever said anything like that to him before. Nobody had ever looked at him like he was anything other than a problem to be solved. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you help me?" Mrs. Franklin smiled through her tears. "Because I've been waiting my whole life to find someone like you, and I'm not going to let you disappear." From that moment on, everything was different. Mrs. Franklin did not retire. She did not move to Florida or Arizona. She had found her reason to stay. She had found the miracle she had stopped believing in. And Marcus Williams, the boy that everyone had given up on, finally had someone who believed in him. The journey was just beginning. Mrs. Franklin did not sleep that night. She lay in bed next to her husband George, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the boy in the basement. Her mind was racing with questions she could not answer. How was it possible? How could a child with no training, no lessons, no ability to read music, play Chopin like a master? How could he hear a piece once and remember it perfectly 3 years later? It did not make sense. It should not be possible. And yet she had heard it with her own ears. The next morning, she called the principal of Jefferson Elementary School. She asked about Marcus Williams. The principal sighed heavily on the other end of the phone. "Marcus Williams," the principal said. "Yes, I know Marcus. He's a troubled case. Very troubled. He's been flagged for special education services, but his mother hasn't signed the paperwork yet. We think he might have some kind of learning disability, but we haven't been able to get him tested." "Learning disability," Mrs. Franklin repeated. "He can barely read. He struggles with basic math. His teachers have tried everything, but nothing seems to work. He just sits in the back of the classroom and stares out the window. Honestly, we're not sure what to do with him." Mrs. Franklin thanked the principal and hung up the phone. Then she sat at her kitchen table for a long time thinking. A learning disability. A boy who could not read or do math. A boy who sat in the back of the classroom, invisible and forgotten. And yet this same boy could play the most difficult piano music ever written, from memory, with more emotion than professional musicians twice his age. Something was not adding up. There was a piece of this puzzle that nobody had found yet. Mrs. Franklin made some phone calls. She talked to friends who worked in special education. She talked to professors at the local university. She read articles and studies and research papers until her eyes hurt and her head ached, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to take shape. 2 weeks after she first heard Marcus play, Mrs. Franklin arranged a meeting with his mother. Linda Williams came to the church on a Saturday afternoon, looking tired and worried and scared. She did not know why a stranger wanted to talk to her about her son, and she was afraid it was bad news. It was always bad news when it came to Marcus. Mrs. Franklin served her tea and sat across from her at a small table in the church hall. Harold was there too, standing quietly in the corner, watching Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Franklin began, "I want to tell you something about your son, something wonderful." Linda's eyes filled with tears before Mrs. Franklin even finished speaking. She was so used to bad news that she had forgotten good news existed. Mrs. Franklin told her everything. She told her about the piano in the basement. She told her about the music. She told her about the Chopin ballade and the songs Marcus had made up himself. She told her about the gift that had been hiding inside her son all along. Linda listened with her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. When Mrs. Franklin finished, Linda could not speak for a long time. She just sat there, crying and shaking, trying to understand what she was hearing. "I don't understand," she finally said. "How can he do that? He can't even read. He can't do simple addition. How can he play piano like that?" This was the question Mrs. Franklin had been waiting for. This was the truth she had uncovered in 2 weeks of research and phone calls and sleepless nights. "Mrs. Williams, I believe your son has a condition called dyslexia. It's a learning difference that affects how the brain processes written language. People with dyslexia see letters and numbers differently than other people. The symbols move around. change places, become confused. It makes reading and math extremely difficult, sometimes nearly impossible. Linda nodded slowly. She had heard the word before, but she had never really understood what it meant. But here's the thing, Mrs. Franklin continued. Dyslexia is not a sign of low intelligence. In fact, many people with dyslexia have above average intelligence. Their brains are wired differently, and that different wiring can sometimes create extraordinary abilities in other areas. What do you mean? I believe Marcus has something called perfect pitch. It means he can identify and remember any musical note without any reference. He also appears to have photographic auditory memory. He can hear something once and remember it perfectly, down to the smallest detail. These abilities are extremely rare. Most musicians spend their whole lives trying to develop even a small fraction of what Marcus has naturally. Linda was staring at her with wide eyes, trying to understand. What you're saying is, his brain, the thing that makes reading hard, is the same thing that makes music easy. Yes, Mrs. Franklin said. Exactly. The very thing that has made school a struggle for Marcus is the same thing that has given him an extraordinary gift. His brain processes sound in a way that most people cannot even imagine. He doesn't just hear music. He sees it, he feels it, he lives inside it. Linda put her head in her hands and wept. She wept for all the years she had blamed herself. She wept for all the nights she had cried alone at the kitchen table, wondering what she had done wrong. She wept for her son, who had carried this gift inside him all along, hidden and unrecognized, while the world called him stupid. He's not slow, Linda whispered through her tears. My baby is not slow. No, Mrs. Franklin said firmly. He is not slow. He is brilliant. He is extraordinary. And with the right help he could be one of the greatest musicians of his generation. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Mrs. Franklin worked with the school to get Marcus properly tested. The results confirmed what she had suspected. Marcus had severe dyslexia, which explained his struggles with reading and math. But he also tested in the gifted range for auditory processing and musical intelligence. His scores were so high that the psychologist who administered the test had to check her numbers twice. The label that had followed Marcus's whole life, the label of slow and struggling and problem child, was finally replaced with the truth. He was not broken. He was not defective. He was simply different, in a way that the world had not been able to see. Mrs. Franklin began giving Marcus's private piano lessons, free of charge. She did not teach him the way she taught other students. She could not, because Marcus could not read music. The notes on the page danced and twisted just like letters did. Instead, she played pieces for him and let him learn by listening. She would play a phrase, and Marcus would play it back perfectly on the first try. She would play a whole page, and he would play it back without a single mistake. What took other students weeks to learn, Marcus learned in minutes. But it was not just his memory that amazed her, it was his interpretation. When Marcus played, he did not just copy what he heard. He added something to it, something that came from deep inside him. He played with emotion that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old boy. He played like someone who had lived 100 years and felt every moment of it. Where does it come from? She asked him one day. When you play, where does all that feeling come from? Marcus thought about the question for a long time. Then he said something that Mrs. Franklin would never forget. When I play, I'm saying all the things I can't say with words. All the things that get stuck inside me because I can't write them down or read them out loud. The piano speaks for me. The piano says what I can't. Mrs. Franklin felt her heart break and heal at the same time. This boy had been trapped inside himself for years, unable to express what was in his heart because the world only valued words on a page. But music had given him a voice. Music had set him free. As the weeks passed, Marcus began to change. He stood a little taller. He spoke a little louder. He looked people in the eye instead of staring at the floor. The gift that had been hidden inside him was finally being seen, and it was transforming him from the inside out. But Mrs. Franklin knew that this was just the beginning. Marcus had a gift, but gifts needed to be shared. They needed to be seen by more than just a janitor and a tired music teacher in a church basement. The world needed to know about Marcus Williams. The world needed to hear what he could do, and soon, very soon, they would. The boy who had been called stupid his whole life was about to show everyone how wrong they had been. The curse that had followed him for years was about to reveal itself as a blessing in disguise, and nothing would ever be the same again. The winter assembly at Jefferson Elementary School was always held in the second week of December. It was a tradition that had been going on for 30 years. Students performed songs and skits, teachers gave out awards, and parents filled the auditorium with cameras and proud smiles. For most children, the winter assembly was exciting. It was a chance to show off, to be seen, to make their families proud. But for Marcus Williams, the winter assembly had always been a nightmare. Last year, he had been forced to participate in a group reading. The whole class stood on stage and read a holiday poem together, one line at a time. When Marcus's turn came, he stared at the words on the paper and felt them twist and dance and refuse to be read. He stumbled over syllables that should have been simple. He mispronounced words that children half his age could say without thinking. The audience had giggled. Some of the other students had laughed out loud. Marcus had wanted to disappear. to sink through the floor and never be seen again. He had sworn he would never perform at the winter assembly again. He would get sick that day. He would hide. He would do anything to avoid standing on that stage and feeling the weight of all those eyes, judging him, laughing at him, confirming what he already believed about himself. But that was before Mrs. Franklin. That was before everything changed. It was Mrs. Franklin's idea to have Marcus perform at the assembly. She brought it up one afternoon during their lesson, carefully, gently, like she was handling something fragile. "Marcus," she said, "I think it's time." "Time for what?" "Time for people to hear you play." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He shook his head quickly, his whole body tensing with fear. "No, I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because..." He searched for the words, but they scattered like the letters on a page. "Because they'll laugh at me. They always laugh at me. They think I'm stupid, and when they see me on that stage, they'll remember what happened last year, and they'll laugh." Mrs. Franklin reached out and took his hands in hers. Her hands were warm and steady, and they made him feel a little less afraid. "Marcus, listen to me. Last year they saw a boy who struggled with reading. This year they're going to see something different. They're going to see a boy with a gift, a real gift, and when they hear you play, they're not going to laugh. They're going to be amazed. But what if they don't? What if they still think I'm stupid? Then they'll be wrong, and that will be their problem, not yours. But Marcus, I promise you, when you sit down at that piano and start to play, everything is going to change. You just have to trust me. Can you do that? Can you trust me?" Marcus looked into her eyes. He saw kindness there, and belief, and something that looked like love. Nobody except his mother had ever looked at him like that. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try." The days leading up to the assembly were the longest of Marcus's life. He practiced every day. Not because he needed to learn the music, but because playing calmed his nerves. He played the same piece over and over, a Beethoven sonata that Mrs. Franklin had chosen for him. It was beautiful and powerful, full of drama and emotion, the kind of piece that demanded attention. His mother came to watch him practice sometimes. She sat in the corner of the church basement with tears in her eyes, still not quite able to believe what she was seeing. Her son, her baby, the child she had worried about for so long, was making music that took her breath away. "I'm so proud of you," she told him every day. "No matter what happens at that assembly, I'm so proud of you." The morning of the assembly arrived cold and gray. Snow had fallen during the night, covering the world in white. Marcus woke up with a knot in his stomach so tight he could barely eat breakfast. "You don't have to do this," his mother said, seeing the fear in his eyes. "If you're not ready, we can wait. There will be other chances." But Marcus shook his head. He thought about all the years he had spent hiding, running away, making himself invisible. He thought about the boy he used to be, the one who believed he was stupid and worthless and broken. He did not want to be that boy anymore. "I want to do it," he said. "I have to do it." They walked to school together, mother and son, their feet crunching in the fresh snow. When they reached the auditorium, it was already filling up with parents and students and teachers. The noise was overwhelming, hundreds of voices talking and laughing, chairs scraping against the floor, children running up and down the aisles. Marcus found Mrs. Franklin backstage. She was wearing her best dress, the blue one with the silver buttons, and her eyes were bright with excitement. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I'm scared." "That's okay. Being scared means you care, and caring is what makes great music." She put her hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes. "Remember, Marcus, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself. You're playing because the music deserves to be heard. Everything else doesn't matter." The assembly began. Marcus watched from behind the curtain as other students performed. There were Christmas songs and holiday skits, poems recited and awards given. The audience clapped and cheered and took pictures. It all seemed so far away, like a dream he could not quite touch. And then it was his turn. The principal walked to the microphone and cleared her throat. "Our next performance is a special one," she said. "Many of you know Marcus Williams as a quiet student who sometimes struggles in class. But today, we're going to see a different side of Marcus. Today, he's going to show us what he can really do." A murmur went through the audience. Marcus heard snickers from somewhere in the crowd, probably from the boys who had laughed at him last year. His face burned with shame, and for a moment, he wanted to run. He wanted to disappear through the back door and never come back. But then he felt a hand on his back, pushing him gently forward. It was Mrs. Franklin. "Go," she whispered. "Show them who you are." Marcus walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, so bright that he could barely see the audience, but he could feel them watching. He could feel their eyes on him, hundreds of eyes, waiting to see what the stupid boy would do. The piano sat in the center of the stage, black and shining. It was the school's best piano, tuned specially for this performance. Marcus walked toward it slowly, his legs shaking, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He sat down on the bench. He placed his fingers on the keys, and he closed his eyes. For a moment, there was silence. Complete, total silence. The whole auditorium held its breath, and then Marcus began to play. The first notes of Beethoven's Sonata No. 14 filled the room, soft and haunting, like moonlight falling on water. Marcus let the music flow through him, let it take over his hands, his arms, his whole body. He forgot about the audience. He forgot about the snickers and the staring eyes. He forgot about everything except the piano and the music and the feeling of finally being free. The sonata built in intensity, the notes growing stronger and more powerful. Marcus's fingers danced across the keys, moving faster than anyone could follow. The music rose and fell like waves on an ocean, crashing and retreating, building to heights that seemed impossible in the audience. Something was happening. The snickers had stopped. The whispers had died. People were leaning forward in their seats, their mouths open, their eyes wide. They had come expecting to see a struggling student, a boy who could not keep up. Instead, they were seeing something they had never seen before, something they could not explain. Teachers who had written Marcus off as a lost cause felt tears running down their cheeks. Students who had ignored him for years stared at the stage in disbelief. Parents grabbed each other's hands and squeezed, overcome by emotions they could not name. In the front row, Linda Williams was sobbing. She was not crying from sadness anymore. She was crying from joy, from pride, from the overwhelming relief of watching her son finally be seen. The sonata reached its climax, the notes pouring out in a flood of sound and emotion, and then, slowly, it began to fade. The music grew softer, gentler, returning to the haunting melody it had begun with. The last notes hung in the air like echoes of a dream, and then there was silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The audience sat frozen, not sure what they had just witnessed, not sure how to react, and then someone started clapping. It was Mrs. Franklin standing backstage, her hands coming together in loud, sharp applause. Then the principal joined in, then a parent in the front row, then another, and another. Within seconds, the whole auditorium was on its feet. 400 people, standing and clapping and cheering for the boy who could not read. The noise was deafening, a roar of applause that shook the walls and rattled the windows. Marcus opened his eyes and looked out at the audience. He saw his mother standing in the front row, her face wet with tears, her hands raised in the air, clapping harder than anyone. He saw Mrs. Franklin beaming at him from the side of the stage. He saw teachers who had never given him a second glance, now wiping their eyes and shaking their heads in wonder. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Williams felt like he belonged. He stood up from the piano and took a small bow, not knowing what else to do. The applause continued, growing even louder. Some people were chanting his name, some were whistling, some were crying. The boy who had wanted to disappear through the floor last year was now the center of attention, but this time, the attention did not hurt. The video of Marcus playing at the winter assembly spread across the internet like wildfire. Someone's parent had recorded it on their phone and posted it online, and within a week it had been viewed over 2 million times. People from all over the world were watching the small boy sit down at the piano, close his eyes, and create magic with his fingers. Comments poured in from everywhere. This brought me to tears. How is this possible? This child is a gift from God. I've been playing piano for 20 years and I can't do what this kid just did. The praise was overwhelming, and for a little while it felt like the whole world had fallen in love with Marcus Williams. But not everyone was happy. Not everyone believed. It started with whispers at school. Some parents began asking questions. How could a boy who could barely read suddenly play piano like a professional? It did not make sense. It was not possible. Something strange was going on, and they wanted answers. A school board member named Richard Townsend was the first to speak up publicly. He was a tall man with a loud voice and strong opinions about everything. He had never liked surprises, and Marcus was definitely a surprise. I'm not saying the boy isn't talented, Richard said at a school board meeting 2 weeks after the assembly. But I think we need to be careful here. We need to make sure this is real. We need to make sure nobody is being fooled. Mrs. Franklin was at that meeting, and she felt her blood boil. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Townsend? I'm suggesting that we need proof. Real proof. Maybe the boy memorized that one piece and that's all he can do. Maybe someone coached him and he's just repeating what he learned. I think we need to test him properly before we start calling him a prodigy. The room went quiet. Some people nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Franklin stood up, her hands shaking with anger. I have been teaching music for 32 years, she said, her voice steady but fierce. I have seen hundreds of students come through my classroom. I know the difference between a trained performer and a natural gift. Marcus Williams is the most talented musician I have ever encountered in my entire career. He doesn't need to prove anything to you or anyone else. But Richard Townsend was not convinced. He organized a special meeting where Marcus would be tested by music experts from the city. They would play pieces he had never heard and see if he could really learn them instantly. They would ask him to sight read music and see if he could do it. They would put him under pressure and see if he cracked. When Marcus heard about the test, he did not want to do it. He sat in the church basement with Mrs. Franklin, his shoulders hunched, his eyes on the floor. They don't believe me, he said quietly. They think I'm a liar. They're scared, Mrs. Franklin said. People get scared when they see something they don't understand. But Marcus, you don't have to prove anything to them. You can say no. You can walk away. Marcus thought about it for a long time. He thought about all the years he had been invisible, all the times people had looked right through him. He thought about the standing ovation at the assembly, the feeling of finally being seen, and he thought about all the other kids out there like him, kids who were called stupid because they were different, kids who had gifts that nobody could see. "No," he said finally, "I'll do it. I'll show them." The test was held on a Saturday afternoon in the school auditorium. The music experts sat in the front row with clipboards and serious faces. Richard Townsend sat behind them, his arms crossed, waiting to be proven right. A small crowd of parents and teachers filled the seats behind them, including Marcus's mother, who had not slept the night before. Mrs. Franklin sat at the side of the stage, her hands clasped together, her heart pounding. The lead expert, a professor from the city conservatory named Dr. Harold Chen, stood up and addressed Marcus. "This young man, we're going to play a piece of music for you, a piece you've never heard before. When it's finished, we want you to play it back for us on the piano. Do you understand?" Marcus nodded. Dr. Chen pressed a button on a small speaker, and music filled the auditorium. It was a complicated piece, full of runs and chords and tricky rhythms. It lasted about 2 minutes. When it finished, the room was silent. "Whenever you're ready," Dr. Chen said. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. Then he placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The music that came out was exactly what had just been played. Every note, every rhythm, every pause. It was perfect. It was impossible. And it was happening right in front of their eyes. Dr. Chen's jaw dropped. The other experts looked at each other in disbelief. Richard Townsend uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his face pale. "Play it again," Dr. Chen said. "But this time, play it in a different key." Marcus nodded and played the piece again, this time in a completely different key, as if he had been playing it that way his whole life. The experts tested him for 2 hours. They played him jazz and classical and modern pieces he had never heard. They asked him to improvise. They asked him to compose something on the spot. Every single time, Marcus delivered. Every single time, he proved that what he could do was real. When it was over, Dr. Chen stood up and faced the audience. His voice was shaking. "In 40 years of studying music and teaching at the highest levels, I have never seen anything like this. This young man has abilities that I cannot explain. He is not a fraud. He is not a trick. He is, quite simply, extraordinary." The audience erupted in applause. Marcus's mother burst into tears. Mrs. Franklin closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks, but Richard Townsend did not clap. He sat in his seat, staring at Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. It was not exactly anger. It was not exactly shame. It was something else, something that looked almost like fear. After the test, things changed again. Marcus was no longer just the boy from the viral video. He was officially, scientifically, undeniably gifted. The local news ran stories about him. A newspaper from the city sent a reporter to interview him. People started recognizing him on the street. But with fame came complications. At school, Marcus's classmates did not know how to treat him anymore. They had spent years ignoring him or mocking him. Now he was famous. Now he was special. Some of them tried to be his friend, but their friendliness felt fake and forced. Others resented him, jealous of the attention he was getting. A few continued to mock him behind his back, whispering that he was still the same stupid kid who could not read. Marcus found himself alone in a new way. Before, he had been invisible. Now, he was visible but untouchable. People looked at him all the time, but nobody really saw him. They saw the gift, they saw the talent, they saw the story. But they did not see the boy underneath it all. The boy who still struggled with reading, who still felt scared and confused, who still did not understand why his brain worked the way it did. His mother noticed the change. She saw him come home from school with his shoulders slumped and his eyes tired. She saw him sit at the piano for hours, not practicing, just playing the same sad melodies over and over. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked him one night, sitting beside him on the piano bench. "I thought it would be different," Marcus said. "I thought when people saw what I could do, they would finally understand me. But they don't. They just see the piano. They don't see me." Linda wrapped her arm around her son and held him close. She did not have the words to make it better. She did not know how to fix a world that only valued people for what they could do, not for who they were. All she could do was hold him. All she could do was love him, and hope that somehow, someday, that would be enough. Mrs. Franklin watched Marcus struggle from a distance. She saw the toll that fame was taking on him. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. She knew that something had to change, but she did not know what. The world had finally seen Marcus's gift, but in seeing the gift, they had forgotten the boy, and that was a mistake that would have consequences. Marcus needed more than admiration. He needed understanding. He needed connection. He needed someone who could see past the music and find the person hiding underneath. He just did not know where to find them. Dr. Elena Voss had not touched a piano in 3 years. She had been one of the greatest concert pianists of her generation, performing in the finest halls in the world, from Vienna to Tokyo to New York. Critics had called her playing transcendent and otherworldly. She had won every major prize. recorded dozens of albums, and inspired millions of people with her music. At the age of 52, she had started to lose her hearing. That it had begun slowly, a ringing in her ears that would not go away, certain frequencies becoming muffled and unclear. She had seen doctors and specialists, tried every treatment they suggested, but nothing worked. The hearing loss continued, and with it, her ability to perform at the level she demanded of herself. Elena had given her final concert in Paris 2 years ago. She had played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the piece that had made her famous, and she had played it beautifully. But only she knew the truth. Only she knew that she could no longer hear certain notes, that she was playing from memory and instinct rather than sound. Only she knew that the music she loved was slowly slipping away from her. After that concert, she had retired to a small house in the mountains of Vermont. She lived alone with her books and her memories, avoiding the piano that sat in her living room like a ghost. She did not want to play anymore. Playing reminded her of everything she had lost. But then, one cold evening in January, a friend sent her a video. "You need to see this," the message said. "Trust me." Elena almost did not watch it. She was tired of people sending her videos of young pianists, hoping she would be impressed, hoping she would come out of retirement to teach or perform. She had seen hundreds of these videos. They were all the same. Talented children playing pieces they had learned from expensive teachers. Nothing special. Nothing that made her feel anything. But something made her click on this video. Something made her watch. The video showed a small boy walking onto a stage in what looked like a school auditorium. He was thin, and his clothes were worn. He did not look like a prodigy. He did not look like anything special. But then he sat down at the piano, and then he began to play. Elena sat frozen in her chair, her hand pressed over her mouth. The boy was playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and he was playing it in a way she had never heard before. It was not just technically perfect, it was emotionally devastating. Every note carried weight. Every phrase had meaning. The music seemed to pour out of him like water from a spring, natural and effortless and alive. When the video ended, Elena realized she was crying. She had not cried in a long time. She had thought that part of her had died along with her hearing. But this boy, this small and ordinary-looking boy, had reached through the screen and touched something inside her that she thought was gone forever. She watched the video again, then again. Then she started searching for more information. She learned about Marcus Williams. She learned about his dyslexia and his struggles in school. She learned about the music teacher who had discovered him and the janitor who had kept his secret. She read articles and watched interviews and studied every piece of footage she could find. And the more she learned, the more she saw herself. Elena had grown up poor in a small town in Poland. She had been a strange child, quiet and awkward, unable to connect with other children her age. School had been difficult for her, not because she was stupid, but because her mind worked differently. She thought in music, not in words. She saw the world in melodies and harmonies, not in sentences and paragraphs. Her teachers had not understood her. Her classmates had called her weird. She had spent most of her childhood alone, just like Marcus, finding comfort in the piano, finding a voice where words failed her. Looking at this boy, Elena saw the child she used to be, and she knew she had to help him. She made a phone call. It took several days and several more phone calls to get the right number, but finally, she reached Mrs. Franklin. "My name is Elena Voss," she said. "I want to come and meet Marcus." Mrs. Franklin nearly dropped the phone. She knew exactly who Elena Voss was. Every serious musician in the world knew who Elena Voss was. The idea that this legendary pianist wanted to meet Marcus seemed impossible, like a dream that could not be real. "Dr. Voss," Mrs. Franklin stammered. I don't know what to say. This is such an honor. Please, call me Elena and the honor is mine. I watched the video of your student, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about him. He has something special, something rare. I would like to help him develop it, if he's willing." 2 weeks later, Elena Voss arrived at the church in a rented car, carrying a small suitcase and wearing simple clothes that hid her famous face. She did not want attention. She did not want cameras or reporters. She just wanted to meet the boy. Marcus was nervous. Mrs. Franklin had told him about Elena, had shown him videos of her performances, had explained how important she was. He felt small and scared, like he was about to meet a queen. But when Elena walked into the church basement, she did not look like a queen. She looked like a grandmother, with gray hair and kind eyes and a warm smile. She walked up to Marcus and held out her hand. "Hello, Marcus," she said. "I'm Elena. I came a long way to meet you." Marcus shook her hand. His palm was sweaty, but Elena did not seem to notice. "Will you play something for me?" she asked. Marcus sat down at the old piano, the same piano where everything had started. He closed his eyes and began to play. He played one of his own compositions, a piece he had never shared with anyone, a piece that was full of all the loneliness and confusion and hope that lived inside him. When he finished, he turned around to look at Elena. She was crying. "That was you," she said quietly. "That was your soul, right there in the music. I could hear everything you feel, everything you are." "Marcus, do you know how rare that is? Most musicians spend their entire lives trying to play with that kind of honesty. You do it naturally." Marcus did not know what to say. No one had ever talked to him like this before. No one had ever understood. Elena sat down on the bench beside him. She looked at the piano, at the cracked keys and the dusty wood, and she smiled. "When I was your age, I was just like you," she said. "I didn't fit in. I couldn't connect with other children. School was hard for me, but the piano understood me. The piano was my friend when I had no other friends." Marcus looked up at her with wide eyes. Really, I know what it feels like to be different, to be misunderstood, to have a gift that nobody else can see. But I also know that this gift is a responsibility. The music inside you, it doesn't just belong to you. It belongs to the world, and you have to learn how to share it without losing yourself. "I don't know how to do that," Marcus admitted. "Everyone wants something from me now. They want me to perform, to be special, to be amazing all the time. But I'm not amazing. I'm just me. I'm just a kid who can't even read properly." Elena took his hand in hers. Her hands were old and spotted with age, but they were gentle and strong. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. The world will try to turn you into a product. They will try to take your gift and use it for their own purposes. They will put pressure on you, expectations on you, demands on you. And if you let them, they will crush you. So what do? You remember who you are. Not Marcus the prodigy. Not Marcus the boy who plays piano. Just Marcus, a child who loves music. A person with feelings and fears and dreams. You play for yourself first. Always. You play because the music is inside you and it needs to come out. And if other people enjoy it, that's wonderful. But that's not why you play. You play because it's who you are." Marcus felt something shift inside him. For months he had felt like the music was becoming a burden, a weight he had to carry to make everyone happy. But Elena was reminding him why he had started playing in the first place. Not for applause, not for attention, but because the piano was the only place where he felt whole. "Will you teach me?" Marcus asked. "Will you help me?" Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked young again, like the child she used to be. "Yes, Marcus, I will teach you everything I know. But more importantly, I will help you stay true to yourself. Because the greatest musicians are not the ones who play the most notes. They are the ones who play with the most heart. And your heart, Marcus, is extraordinary." From that day on, everything changed again. Elena rented a small apartment in town and began working with Marcus every week. She taught him technique and theory, history and interpretation. But most importantly, she taught him how to protect the thing that made him special. She taught him how to survive. For 6 months, everything seemed perfect. Marcus worked with Elena 3 times a week, learning things about music that he never knew existed. He grew stronger as a player, more confident, more expressive. His mother watched him blossom with pride and joy. Mrs. Franklin watched from a distance, happy that her discovery was being nurtured by someone who truly understood him. But outside of the small, a safe world that Elena had created, a storm was building. The video of Marcus had continued to spread. It had been featured on national news programs and shared by celebrities with millions of followers. Music producers began calling, wanting to sign Marcus to record contracts. Television shows wanted him to appear as a guest. Talent agencies sent representatives to knock on his mother's door, offering deals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. At first, Linda tried to ignore them. She knew her son was not ready for that kind of attention. She knew he was still a child, still learning, still growing. But the offers kept coming, bigger and more tempting each time. And as someone who had worked 2 jobs her whole life just to keep the lights on, the money was hard to resist. "Think about what this could mean for us," one agent told her. "Marcus could be set for life. You would never have to work again. You could give him everything he deserves." Linda talked to Elena about it. Elena's face grew serious and worried. "I've seen this happen before," Elena said. "A child shows extraordinary talent, and the world rushes in to exploit it. They don't care about the child. They care about the product. They will use Marcus up and throw him away when he stops being profitable." "But maybe it could be different," Linda said. "Maybe we could control it. Just a few performances, a few recordings, enough to give him opportunities." Elena shook her head. "There is no such thing as just a few. Once you open that door, you cannot close it. The pressure will keep building, the expectations will keep growing, and Marcus will have to carry all of it on his small shoulders." But Linda was torn. She loved her son more than anything. She wanted to protect him, but she also wanted to give him a better life, opportunities she had never had. She was tired of being poor. She was tired of struggling, and part of her wondered if Elena was just being overprotective. In the end, Linda made a decision. She agreed to let Marcus do a few carefully selected appearances, a morning talk show, a charity concert, a recording session for a documentary about young musicians. She told herself it would be fine. She told herself she would watch over him every step of the way. At first, Marcus seemed to handle it well. He performed on television with grace and poise. He played at the charity concert to a standing ovation. He sat through interviews and smiled at cameras and said the things people wanted to hear. But inside, something was changing. The pressure was building, just as Elena had warned. Every performance had to be better than the last. Every interview had to be more charming. Every photo had to capture the perfect image of the boy genius. Marcus felt like he was being stretched in 100 different directions, pulled apart by hands he could not see. He started having trouble sleeping. He would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if he made a mistake during a performance? What if people stopped thinking he was special? What if the whole world realized he was just a regular kid who could not even read a book? The anxiety grew worse. Before performances, his hands would shake so badly he could barely press the keys. His stomach would twist into knots, and sometimes he would throw up in the bathroom before going on stage. He learned to hide it, to smile and pretend everything was fine. But the effort of pretending was exhausting. His mother noticed that he was eating less. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She noticed that the joy had gone out of his playing, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Are you okay, baby?" she asked him one night. "I'm fine," Marcus said. But his voice was flat and empty. Alina noticed too. During their lessons, Marcus was distracted and tired. His playing had lost its spark. The raw emotion that had made him special seemed to have drained away, leaving behind a hollow shell that went through the motions without feeling anything. "Marcus, talk to me," Alina said during one lesson. "What's going on?" Marcus sat at the piano, his hands resting on the keys but not playing. He was silent for a long time. "I can't do this anymore," he finally said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Can't do what?" "Any of it. The shows, the interviews, the cameras. Everyone wants me to be amazing all the time. Everyone expects me to be perfect. But I'm not perfect. I'm not even good. I'm just a trick. A circus act. Something for people to stare at." Alina felt her heart break. She had seen this before, in other young musicians who had been pushed too hard too fast. She had warned Linda. She had warned everyone. But no one had listened. "Marcus, you are not a trick. You are not a circus act. You are a musician with a rare and beautiful gift. Then why does it feel like a curse?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Why does it feel like the music is killing me?" That night, something happened that had never happened before. Marcus refused to touch the piano. He walked into the church basement, where it all had started, looked at the old instrument that had been his best friend for years, and he could not bring himself to play. The piano had always been his escape. It had always been the one place where he felt safe and free. But now, looking at it, all he could think about was the pressure, the expectations, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "I hate it," he said out loud, to no one. "I hate all of it." He left the basement without playing a single note, and he did not go back the next day, or the day after that. Linda found him in his room one afternoon, sitting on his bed staring at the wall. He had missed 3 days of school. He had not eaten a proper meal in almost a week. He looked like a ghost, thin and pale and empty. "Marcus, please talk to me," Linda begged. "Please tell me what's wrong." Marcus turned to look at her, and what she saw in his eyes terrified her. It was not sadness exactly. It was something worse. It was the look of someone who had given up. "They don't want me," Marcus said. "The people watching, the people clapping, they don't want me. They want the trick I can do. They want the amazing piano boy who learned Chopin from the radio. If I couldn't play, they would forget I exist. Just like before." "That's not true," Linda said, tears streaming down her face. "I want you. I love you. Not because of the piano. Because you're my son. But the rest of the world doesn't love me. They love what I can do for them. And I'm tired of doing things for them. I'm tired of being amazing. I just want to be normal. I just want to be a kid." Linda pulled her son into her arms and held him tight. She felt him trembling against her, felt the sobs shaking his small body, and she realized, with horrible clarity, what she had done. She had opened the door, just like Alina had warned her not to. She had let the world in, thinking she could control it, but the world had swallowed her son whole. And now she did not know how to save him. That night, Linda called Alina and told her everything. Alina listened in silence, her heart heavy with grief. "We need to stop everything," Alina said. "Cancel all the appearances, all the interviews, everything. Marcus needs time to heal. But what about his career? What about all the opportunities?" "There is no career if there is no Marcus," Alina said firmly. "The boy is more important than the musician. If we don't save him now, we might lose him forever." So they stopped everything. They canceled the recordings and the shows and the interviews. They pulled Marcus out of the spotlight and wrapped him in silence and safety. But the damage had been done. The boy who had once played piano with pure joy now looked at the instrument with fear and resentment. The gift that had set him free had become a prison, and no one knew if he would ever find his way back. 3 months passed. 3 months of silence and healing and slowly putting the pieces back together. Marcus did not play piano for the first month. He did not even look at one. He spent his days reading comic books that had more pictures than words, watching movies with his mother, and taking long walks through the neighborhood with Alina. They did not talk about music. They did not talk about performances or careers or the future. They just walked and talked about ordinary things, like the weather and the birds and what they might have for dinner. Slowly, very slowly, Marcus began to come back to himself. The dark circles under his eyes faded. He started eating again. He started smiling. Sometimes, when something funny happened, the ghost that had haunted his face began to disappear. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the breakdown, Marcus was walking past the church with Alina when he stopped suddenly. He stood in front of the old building, looking at the door that led to the basement, the door that led to the piano. "I think I want to play," he said quietly. "Not for anyone else. Just for me." Alina nodded. "Then let's go inside." They went down to the basement, and Marcus sat at the old piano for the first time in almost 2 months. His fingers touched the keys gently, like he was greeting an old friend he had hurt and now wanted to apologize to. He began to play. It was not anything he had learned from a recording or been taught in a lesson. It was something new, something that came from deep inside him. It was slow and gentle and sad, but there was something else in it too, something that sounded like hope. When he finished, he turned to Alina. His eyes were wet with tears, but he was smiling. "I missed it," he said. "I missed the music. I thought I hated it, but I didn't. I just hated what they were doing to it, what they were doing to me." Alina sat beside him and put her arm around his shoulders. "The music was never the problem, Marcus. The music has always been your friend. It was the pressure that hurt you, the expectations, the people who wanted to use your gift for their own purposes. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to perform for cameras and strangers who just want to see a trick." "You don't have to," Alina said. "You never have to do anything you don't want to do. But Marcus, I need to tell you something. There's a competition coming up, the Young Artists Piano Competition. It's one of the most important competitions for young musicians in the country." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "No, I can't do that again." "Hear me out," Alina said gently. "I'm not asking you to compete to win. I'm not asking you to be perfect or amazing or anything else. I want you to enter this competition for a different reason." "What reason?" "I want you to play for yourself, not for the judges, not for the audience, not for your mother or me or anyone else. I want you to go on that stage and play whatever is in your heart, without worrying about what anyone thinks. I want you to take back the music, to make it yours again." Marcus was quiet for a long time. The idea of standing on a stage again, with people watching and judging, made him feel sick. But there was something in what Alina was saying that spoke to him, something about taking back what had been taken from him. "What if I fail?" he asked. "What if I make mistakes?" "Then you make mistakes," Alina said simply, "and that's okay. Mistakes don't mean you're a failure. They mean you're human. The greatest musicians in history made mistakes all the time. What made them great was not their perfection. It was their courage to keep playing anyway." Over the next 2 months, Marcus prepared for the competition in a way he had never prepared for anything before. He did not practice someone else's music, memorized and polished to perfection. Instead, he worked on his own composition, a piece that told the story of everything he had been through, the loneliness of being different, the joy of discovering his gift, the pain of being used, and the hope of finding his way back. The piece was not technically perfect. It had rough edges and unusual rhythms. It did not follow the rules that competition judges usually looked for, but it was honest. It was real. It was Marcus. The day of the competition arrived. It was held in a beautiful concert hall in the city, with red velvet seats and golden chandeliers, and a stage that seemed as big as a football field. Hundreds of people filled the audience, including judges, music critics, and other young pianists who had come to compete. Marcus stood backstage, watching the other performers through a gap in the curtain. They were good, really good. They played complicated pieces with speed and precision, their fingers flying across the keys like machines. The audience applauded politely after each performance. The judges nodded and wrote notes on their clipboards. Linda stood beside Marcus, holding his hand. She had not pushed him to do this. She had learned her lesson. But when he told her he wanted to compete, she had supported him completely. "You don't have to be perfect," she reminded him. "You just have to be you." Alina was there too, sitting in the front row of the audience. She had told Marcus she would be watching, not with judgment but with love. No matter what happened, she was proud of him. Finally, it was Marcus's turn. He walked onto the stage, and the lights hit him like a wave of heat. The audience was a sea of faces, hundreds of strangers waiting to see what he would do. For a moment, the old fear grabbed him by the throat. He thought about running. He thought about disappearing. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong. But then he looked at the piano, the beautiful grand piano, black and shining, waiting for him like an old friend. And he remembered why he was here, not to be perfect, not to win, but to take back the music, to play for himself. He sat down at the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys, and he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he did not see the audience anymore. He did not see the judges or the cameras or the people waiting to judge him. He saw only the keys beneath his fingers. The music waiting to be born. He began to play. The piece started slowly, with a simple melody that sounded almost like a lullaby. It was the theme of loneliness, the sound of a child sitting alone in a classroom, invisible and forgotten. The notes were soft and sad, carrying all the pain of those years when no one understood him. Then the music began to change. New melodies emerged, tangling with the first, creating something more complex. This was the discovery, the moment when the piano had spoken to him for the first time. The notes grew brighter, more hopeful, like sunlight breaking through clouds. But then darkness crept in. The music became heavy and chaotic, full of dissonance and tension. This was the pressure, the expectations, the feeling of being pulled apart by hands he could not see. Marcus played with raw emotion, letting all the pain and anger pour out through his fingers. And then, finally, the music began to heal. The chaos faded into something gentle and peaceful. The melodies came together, no longer fighting but harmonizing. This was hope. This was the future. This was Marcus, finding his way back to himself. The piece ended with a single note, held for a long moment, then fading into silence. For a few seconds nothing happened. The audience sat frozen, not sure how to react. This was not like the other performances. This was not what they expected, and then, from somewhere in the middle of the audience, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. It was not a standing ovation. It was not the thunderous applause Marcus had received at his school assembly. It was something quieter, something more real. It was the sound of people who had been genuinely moved, who had felt something they could not explain. Marcus looked out at the audience, and for the first time in months, he smiled. Not because he had won, not because he had impressed anyone, but because he had done something more important. He had played for himself. He had played his truth, and it had been enough. When the results were announced later that evening, Marcus did not win first place. He did not even win second. He placed fourth behind 3 other young pianists who had played more traditional pieces with more technical precision. But when the judges gave their comments, the head judge, an old man with white hair and kind eyes, said something that Marcus would never forget. Marcus Williams played something today that I have never heard before. It was not perfect. It was not what we usually look for in a competition, but it was honest, it was brave, and it reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Sometimes the most important performances are not the ones that win, they are the ones that tell the truth. After the competition, Alina found Marcus backstage. She was crying and smiling at the same time. "You did it," she said. "You took back the music. You made it yours again." Marcus hugged her tightly. He did not care about the 4th place ribbon in his hand. He did not care about the judges or the other competitors or any of it. He cared only about the feeling inside him, the feeling of being free again. The music was his once more, and no one would ever take it away. 10 years had passed since the competition where Marcus placed 4th. 10 years of growing and learning and becoming the man he was always meant to be. Marcus Williams was now 21 years old. He had grown tall and strong, with the same kind eyes and gentle smile that had belonged to the boy who could not read. He no longer lived in the small apartment where he had grown up. He had moved to a house in the suburbs, big enough for his mother to have her own room, big enough for a grand piano in the living room, big enough for the life they had always dreamed of. But Marcus was not famous, not in the way everyone had expected when he was a child. He had not become a concert pianist touring the world's great stages. He had not signed record deals or appeared on television shows. He had taken a different path, a path that surprised everyone who knew him. Marcus taught music. He taught it to children who were just like he used to be. It had started small a few years after the competition. A local school for children with learning disabilities had reached out to him, asking if he would be willing to come and play for their students. Marcus had agreed, expecting to give a short performance and leave. But when he arrived, something unexpected happened. There was a girl in the audience, about 8 years old, with curly brown hair and thick glasses. She had autism, the teachers told him, and she rarely spoke to anyone. She spent most of her days alone, unable to connect with the other children, unable to express what was inside her. But when Marcus played, the girl changed. She leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide, her whole body focused on the music. And when he finished, she did something she had never done before. She walked up to the stage, stood in front of Marcus, and spoke. "How do you do that?" she asked. Her voice was soft and uncertain, like she had forgotten how to use it. "How do you make the piano talk?" Marcus knelt down so he was at her level. He looked into her eyes, and he saw himself. He saw the lonely child in the back of the classroom, the one who could not fit in, the one who could not make the world understand. "I'll show you," he said. "Come sit with me." He took her to the piano and placed her small hands on the keys. He showed her how to press them, how to make sounds, how to turn those sounds into something meaningful. The girl listened with total concentration, and when she played her first simple melody, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "It's talking," she whispered. "The piano is talking for me." From that moment, Marcus knew what he was meant to do. He went back to school himself. He studied music therapy and special education. He learned how to help children who struggled with traditional learning, children whose brains worked differently, children who had gifts that the world could not see. And then he opened his own school. The Williams Music Academy was a small building on a quiet street. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive from the outside. But inside, magic happened every day. Children who had been told they would never learn anything discovered that they could create beautiful music. Children who had never been able to express themselves found their voices through instruments. Children who had been written off by the world found a place where they belonged. Marcus taught them all. He taught them piano and guitar and drums and violin. But more importantly, he taught them what Elena had taught him. He taught them that their differences were not weaknesses. He taught them that the things that made them struggle in some areas could make them extraordinary in others. He taught them that they mattered, exactly as they were. One afternoon, Marcus was sitting in his office when there was a knock on the door. A woman entered, holding the hand of a small boy. The boy was about 10 years old, thin and scared, with his head down and his shoulders hunched forward. "My son," the woman said, her voice trembling. "His teachers say he can't learn. They say he's slow. But I know there's something inside him. I know he's more than what they see." Marcus looked at the boy, and his heart ached with recognition. He saw the same fear, the same shame, the same desperate hope that he had carried for so many years. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. The boy did not look up. "David," he whispered. "David, do you want to see something cool?" The boy shrugged, still not meeting Marcus's eyes. Marcus led them to the music room, where a piano sat in the center, surrounded by other instruments. He sat down at the piano and began to play, a soft and simple melody that filled the room with warmth. David lifted his head. For the first time, there was a spark of interest in his eyes. "Do you want to try?" Marcus asked. David hesitated, then nodded. He sat down on the bench beside Marcus, and Marcus guided his fingers to the keys. He showed him how to play a simple pattern, just 3 notes, over and over. At first, David was awkward and uncertain, but then something shifted. His fingers found a rhythm, his body relaxed, and for a moment, just a brief moment, a smile crossed his face. "I did it," he said quietly. "I made music." "Yes, you did," Marcus said. "And David, I want you to know something very important." David looked up at him, waiting. "I was just like you when I was your age. I couldn't read, I couldn't do math. Everyone thought I was stupid. But I wasn't stupid. I was just different. And that difference, the thing that made everything so hard, also gave me a gift. It gave me music." David's eyes widened. "Really? Really? And I'm going to tell you something that no one ever told me when I was your age. Are you ready?" David nodded. Marcus leaned forward and looked into the boy's eyes. He spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word was heard. "The things that make you different, they might be the best parts of you. You are not broken. You are not slow. You are not a mistake. You are exactly who you are supposed to be. And one day you're going to find your gift, just like I found mine." David stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, his eyes filled with tears. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of finally being seen. "Thank you," David whispered. Marcus put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're welcome. Now, let's see what other music you have inside you." Later that evening, after all the students had gone home and the building was quiet, Marcus sat alone at the piano in the main room. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He thought about his journey. The silent boy in the back row, the discovery in the church basement, Mrs. Franklin and Harold and Elena, the fame that almost destroyed him, the competition where he played his truth. And now, a school full of children who reminded him of himself. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. It was not a famous piece or a difficult composition. It was the same simple melody he had taught David earlier that day. 3 notes, over and over, a pattern as simple as breathing. But as he played, other melodies joined in. The music grew and expanded, becoming something complex and beautiful, something that held all the years of his life within it. He played for the boy he used to be, the one who thought he was stupid and worthless. He played for his mother, who had never stopped believing in him. He played for Mrs. Franklin and Harold and Elena, the people who had seen his gift when no one else could. He played for all the children he had taught, and all the children he would teach in the years to come. And he played for himself, for the man he had become, for the life he had built from the ruins of what everyone expected. The piano had revealed many truths over the years. It had revealed his gift when the world saw only his weaknesses. It had revealed his pain when he could not speak it. It had revealed his hope when he thought it was gone. But the greatest truth the piano had revealed was this: Marcus Williams was not defined by what he could not do. He was defined by what he chose to do with what he had. And what he chose was to help others find their own music, their own gifts, their own truths. The sun sank below the horizon, and the room filled with darkness. But Marcus kept playing, his fingers moving across the keys, his heart full of peace. Outside the window, the first stars appeared in the sky, and somewhere in the city a child who had been told they would never amount to anything was dreaming of something more, dreaming of a gift they had not yet discovered, dreaming of a future they could not yet see. And one day, maybe one day soon, they would find their way to a small building on a quiet street, where a man with kind eyes and gentle hands would sit beside them at a piano and say the words that would change everything. The things that make you different, they might be the best parts of you, and the music would begin again.